What happened here? What Michael Jackson music video have we stumbled into? Hello everyone, I hope that you are having a wonderful day. My name is Emily and welcome to another episode of If the Slipper Fits. This is my series where I discuss just about any version of the Cinderella fairy tale that I can get my hands on. So I had every intention of getting this video out in time for Christmas. I had the script written and ready to go, but then Christmas just snuck up on me and I had other things that I needed to take care of, and then I went out of town and then I got sick, which if you're hearing anything weird with my voice, I'm fine now, but I've still got a little bit of like congestion and stuffiness that I still haven't managed to kick. But otherwise, I'm completely fine. I'm not like pushing through an illness to make this video. But the reason that I wanted to get it out in time for Christmas is because today we are taking a look at 3 wishes for Cinderella. This is also sometimes translated as 3 nuts for Cinderella or 3 gifts for Cinderella. I've actually had a couple of people request this movie to be covered in the series, so thank you very much. And even before I started making these videos, this movie has been on my watch list for a while, and that is mainly due to the fact that whenever I've seen people mention this one online, it's always followed by, "Oh, this is such a tradition for me. I watch this every Christmas. The holidays aren't complete until we watch this movie." So that naturally made me very curious. This film was made in what was then Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, and was originally released in 1973. And since then, there are several European countries that will play this movie on TV around the Christmas season, which probably explains why it's such a tradition for people. It was co-written and directed by Ritcheson. Thank you to the IMDb trivia section for teaching me how to say that. And he seems to have worked on a handful of other projects that have fairy tale or fantasy themes to them, including another movie starring Cinderella's actress Lyubousha Safrankova, which has added itself to my personal watch list if I can find it. Now, when it comes to 3 wishes, I obviously had to find a version that had some sort of English translation. And as I dug deep enough, I actually found a few different options. Dubbed versions seem to take some small liberties, but luckily when it came to the subtitled ones, the general gist of the translation seemed to retain itself. While the picture quality isn't the best, I chose to use the footage that you're seeing now because it was the only one I could find where the subtitles were actually overlaid on the picture so that you all could see it, as opposed to like turning on the caption widget in the player. All that said, let's go ahead and jump into it. As usual, I will give you a brief synopsis of the story just so that we're all on the same page for discussion, and then we will come back and actually discuss. The film begins with the staff of the estate where Cinderella lives preparing for a feast and the arrival of the royal family. The estate is run by Cinderella's stepmother, who has one daughter of her own named Dora. A boy who works in the kitchen nearly faces the stepmother's wrath when he breaks a plate, but Cinderella takes the blame for him. In a short but heated exchange, we learn that Cinderella's father used to take her out riding and hunting in the woods, and she clearly loved him since she defends him against her stepmother's criticism. The stepmother dumps a load of peas in a bucket of ashes, telling Cinderella to sort them as punishment, and reminds her that she is forbidden from riding the horse her father gave her. A flock of doves flies in to do the sorting for her, and she takes the opportunity to sneak out and go riding. One of the other servants, Vincek, asks if she's at all interested in seeing the royal family, namely the prince, and she kinda dodges the question. Just as the entourage arrives, Cinderella and her horse sneak away to fetch his saddle in the loft. She also speaks with the owl who lives in the loft and guards her little box of treasures. Cinderella then goes out riding in the snow, but happens across the prince and his friends who are out hunting. She throws a snowball at him to make him miss shooting a deer, and the 3 chase after her. When they catch up to her, they remark how she is just a little girl, but she runs away before they can get any revenge. Back at the estate, the stepmother basically kisses up to the king and queen so much that they relent to inviting her and Dora to the upcoming ball. The prince meets up with the entourage as they leave, reprimanded for constantly running off and avoiding his studies, and both the king and queen remind him that they want him married sooner rather than later. The stepmother sends Vincek into town for materials for their new outfits, and he finds Cinderella doing laundry in the river on the way out. He offers to bring something back for her to try and cheer her up, and she asks for the first thing that hits him on the nose. Back at the castle, the king and queen are going over the guest list for the ball, which includes a great number of eligible ladies. The prince isn't the least bit interested and only wants to sneak out with his friends to go hunting. In the woods, they notice Vincek going by on the sleigh, dozing off, and the prince shoots a bird's nest to fall on him. Inside the nest, Vincek finds a small twig with 3 hazelnuts on it and brings it back to Cinderella. Dora and the stepmother realize there were some other items they forgot to send for and decide to go into town themselves this time. While they're gone, Cinderella goes up to the loft to talk to the owl, wishing she was free to go anywhere she wanted like he is. She accidentally drops one of the hazelnuts and notices something strange coming out of it, which turns out to be a hunting outfit and equipment. She gets dressed and goes riding on her horse. At this time, the prince and several other young men are out on a hunting contest, and Cinderella follows behind them. The lead huntsman with them announces a ring will be awarded to the first one who shoots down a bird of prey. When they come across one, the prince doesn't take his shot, so Cinderella shoots it down and makes herself known to the group. The prince seems a little put out this mystery person has stolen his thunder, but presents her with the ring and asks her to shoot down a cone from the top of a tree. After that, she runs back into the forest and he follows her, only to find Cinderella in her usual clothes up a tree, and they tease each other a bit more before his friends catch up. Back at the house, the stepmother and Dora are getting dressed for the ball. Cinderella asks if she can go just so she can look through the window, and promising she would still get all her chores done by morning. The stepmother then dumps bowls of lentils and corn on the floor, telling her she wants them cleaned and sorted by the time they get back, and the two of them ride off. But the doves fly in again to do the work for her, and she sneaks out to the loft. After talking to the owl, she decides to try breaking another hazelnut, and inside this one is a beautiful dress. Her horse suddenly appears, saddled and ready to go, and Cinderella suspects the owl had something to do with it. She rides off to the ball and peeks through the window. Thus far, the prince has been no less disinterested, basically choosing his dance partners at random. Cinderella is hesitant when she sees him dancing with Dora, but talks herself into actually going inside. She walks in just when the prince has declared he's had enough and tries to storm out, but he stops when he notices her and asks her to dance. He tries to figure out who she is since she's wearing a veil, and though she evades him at first, he confesses that he wants her to be his bride. When he asks if she'll marry him, she gives him a riddle, describing herself in her usual servant attire, the huntsman clothes, and the ball gown, each time claiming the person is not who they seem. She tells him he needs to find the answer to the riddle, then runs out. He chases after her, picking up the slipper she lost on the castle steps and following her back home. He wakes up all the other servants and explains he's trying to find the princess who came in just before he did. Once they recognize that he is the prince, they let him inspect all of the girls on the property, and without any other clues, he announces the one who fits the slipper he found will be his bride. That's when the stepmother and Dora return. When the prince asks if there's any girl who hasn't tried the slipper yet, Vincek realizes that Cinderella hasn't shown up. As everyone begins to search, the stepmother sees Cinderella sneaking back into her room, still in her ball gown and cloak, so she and Dora sneak into the house with a bundle of rope. They come back out with Dora wearing Cinderella's cloak, which the prince recognizes, but the stepmother demands that he promise to marry her before she tries on the slipper or reveals her face. When the prince won't back down, she steals the slipper and the two of them ride off in the sleigh, and the prince goes after them. They end up in the woods and the sleigh hits a bump, careening into a pond. When the prince pulls over to help them, he recognizes Dora from the ball and, realizing she's not the girl he's after, takes the slipper back. Back at the house, the servants finally get into Cinderella's room, and we are left to believe she was restrained, but managed to get free and escape out the window. She then goes back to the loft and breaks open the last nut, which has a wedding dress inside. She rides out on her horse just as the prince returns to the house ready to give up his search, and he instantly knows she's the one. He returns her slipper, and she reveals the answer to her riddle, that those people he met were all the same person. They agree to be married, and all of the other servants celebrate, and the film ends with the two of them riding off through the snow together. So first of all, I just want to get it out there. This film is really cute and very charming. And there's something about movies and TV from this time and earlier that like naturally lends itself to being charming, but this film in particular knows how to lean into that without feeling out of place. And I think that the music actually does a lot of heavy lifting in that regard. Nearly every track is just filled with so much whimsy and magic, and it really helps solidify the fairy tale tone because the special effects for the magic tricks are actually kind of minimal. Though I say nearly every track because there's this one song with lyrics that gets used a couple of times, and I swear it's got this very like country western beat to it, and it's all I hear. Hey, please, I'll be lost when you say. But very well sung nonetheless. And overall, I thought the pacing was very decent, meaning that I didn't really notice it one way or the other. The only instance I remember looking at the runtime was when the prince shows up for the slipper fitting and there's like 15 minutes left. But that was more me wondering what else was going to happen rather than like, let's just get through the rest of this chop chop. Come on, not that. Cinderella herself, or Popelka as she's called in Czech, which I think is adorable, is very spunky and like isn't afraid to get into mischief. It's a very refreshing take that still feels true to the roots of the character. She talks back to her stepmother, she sweeps dust in their faces. She has a lot of animal friends, but she's also a skilled hunter after being taught by her father. You know, at first, the scene with the snowball felt like she was trying to save the deer, but upon rewatch, it's clear she's just messing with the prince and the deer is inconsequential. This brings me to my only major hiccup with this film. The fact that both main characters have a significant interest in hunting is not what bothers me, because this film is clearly set at some point in the past where hunting was a more necessary survival skill. But I am bothered by the dead animals they have absolutely no issue with showing on screen during the hunting contest scene. The fox in particular definitely shocked me. I didn't expect them to be so, like, direct about it.
Oh, God! Gee, ow! No! Put it down! I'm suddenly not enjoying this anymore. Oh, no. Tell me when it's over.
See, when it comes to the obligatory fox hunting scene in cinema, I'm more used to things like Mary Poppins or Auntie Mame, where you root for the fox to get away. But that is not what happens here. And it's just a bit hard for me to wrap my brain around how we have some animals that get names and we're clearly supposed to care about them very much, and then we have other animals that are just meant to be trophies. It just seems a bit arbitrary where that line is drawn. Ultimately, I am chalking this up to my sensitivities as an American, and a very soft-hearted one at that, not lining up with the sensitivities of Czechoslovakia in the 70s, as well as the time period of the film. On a more positive note, what I find most fascinating about this film is the riddle that she gives the prince at the ball. It's not often that we see Cinderella actively encouraging the prince to figure out who she is, even if this is a very roundabout way of doing it. I have seen a lot of adaptations where Cinderella tries to hide behind the mystery and fears that once the love interest figures out who she really is, that whatever's between them will be lost. But here, her disguises aren't really treated as something to hide behind, but as a means of getting closer to her love interest. And with the riddle, she's like dangling this metaphorical carrot in front of his face, like, come on, dummy, figure it out. If her tomboyish nature wasn't already pulling its weight, this just proves how comfortable and confident Cinderella is in herself. Now, returning viewers might think that I'm about to slam this prince character as yet another one who has absolutely no brain cells. And while that happens to be true, it feels much more intentional for this character. The whole point of this prince is that he's kind of a slacker. He's the popular football player who only cares about football, yet is about to be kicked off the team because his grades are so bad, and actually isn't interested in dating at all until he meets the right girl and does a complete 180. As backwards as it may seem though, I think it actually helps to give Cinderella a better foundation to be interested in him as a person rather than as a prince, which isn't often a problem in the first place, but just nice to confirm all the same. I think the romance is actually surprisingly sound considering when it was made and the genre of the film. Now, they don't necessarily have any like deep and meaningful conversation, but not only do they meet several times before the ball, but their personalities are very compatible. They both love hunting and being outdoors in general, not to mention they're both jokesters. Even if they do jump to marriage rather quickly, as is standard for fairy tales, you are left with a sense that these two are genuinely going to enjoy being with each other once the honeymoon phase wears off. Not to mention, the two of them combined are going to be an absolute menace on the king and queen, and I am here for it. There is one thing that doesn't quite make sense to me though. At the end, when Cinderella comes out in her wedding dress, she offers the ring she won from the hunting contest back to the prince, but he gives it back and says it's hers. To me, that is enough proof that he's realized all of these people are in fact the same girl. But as she goes through the clues for her riddle again, he's acting like he's just putting all of these pieces together for the first time. So why did he put the ring back on her? I think having Cinderella herself explain everything after she told him he needs to figure out the riddle in the first place sort of defeats the purpose, as cute as this moment is. Were I in power, I would have had the prince recite the riddle to her and prove himself. There's also no kissing in this film at all, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I should say, but it is an interesting move, especially since the romance aspect really takes a front seat in this adaptation rather than being treated as a reward. And again, neither of those options are inherently better than the other, just different. Okay, let's move on and talk about some of the side characters. Starting with the king and queen, who I very much enjoyed. There was just something about their dialogue in particular that just made them feel very full. You can tell that each of them has lived a life rather than just being slapped into the story as generic royal archetypes, which is a rarity for minor characters in a fairy tale.
Tím se pochopitelně synovi chlubit nebudu. No tak chápej, no.
Drahý, stejně ve všem po tobě. Ve všem podstatném.
Ne.
Ano.
I just had a smile on my face whenever these two talked. I also really enjoyed Vincek as well, and I don't think he got nearly enough love or screen time. And a great example of that is how I had to look up what his name was because they don't refer to him by any name through the entire film, or at least what I got in the subtitles. Not only does he serve the very important role of bringing her the hazelnuts, but he serves as Cinderella's surrogate father figure.
Kdyby to bylo na mě, tak bych ti přivez, co by si jenom přála. Na mou duši.
It's obvious that he cares about her a lot. Even if she never tells him outright, he knows that she likes the prince and that she's upset about not getting to go to the ball. And when she and the prince get engaged, he is the only one not yelling and jumping for joy. There's like this quiet look of melancholy in his eye, like he's proud of her, but he's also having to say goodbye to his little girl. God, why did I just make myself sad? There is one character that I didn't didn't mention in the synopsis, and that is the prince's tutor. And I didn't bring him up because he basically only serves as a living example of how the prince avoids his responsibilities when we already have plenty of other evidence to show that. The tutor is a very one-note comic relief character, trying his hardest to get the prince and his friends to focus on their studies, but he usually ends up chasing after them and running out of breath because they've ditched him to go hunting. But even when you think you've completely forgotten about him,
Za chvíli začíná hodina dějepravy.
that moment made me howl the first time I watched this. It is the weirdest moment to end it on, and yet I can't not laugh at it. Just bless this man. I don't have too much to say about the stepmother. She just didn't really stand out to me. Aside from the scene in the kitchen where she grabs a horsewhip off the wall and you think that she's going to use it to punish somebody, but apparently changes her mind. She seems to prefer punishing with labor rather than violence. I also have no earthly idea what the plan was when she stole the slipper and rode off into the night. Like, what did she think was going to happen? On the other hand, the choice of having a single stepsister rather than two is very interesting. I feel like an intentional way of doing this would be to make the single stepsister more of a foil to Cinderella rather than just a lackey to her mother. The example of the type of person who can win her affection and is therefore protected. I don't think there's enough evidence to support that argument here, though. They do bring up the point that Cinderella's father apparently loved Dora even though he was only a stepfather, so why can't that be true for Cinderella and her stepmother? They don't dwell on the idea very long, but honestly, I'm kind of shocked that it doesn't come up in more adaptations, challenging that unspoken fairy tale rule that all stepmothers need to be horrible when it isn't always the case the other way around. Also, does anyone else think that Dora's actress looks like Carrie Hope Fletcher? And I mean that as a compliment in both directions. And speaking of looks, for me, most of the costumes in this film ride the line between fancifully old-fashioned and completely ridiculous. The perfect example of this is the stepmother's look for the ball. The multi-layered fur cloak is cool and evocative, while the headdress is... I don't even know how to describe. It also comes very close to catching on fire at one point. They also love to put the prince in these bright, saturated colors, which I don't think are the most practical if you spend 80% of your time trying to hunt animals in the snow. And this look with the gold glitter, like what happened here? What Michael Jackson music video have we stumbled into? While not necessarily a huge standout from the other women in the scene, I do enjoy Cinderella's ball gown. The pink color suits her, it's youthful while still being elegant and a little sophisticated, and I think the bird printed on the back of her train is very appropriate. As we've learned from looking at literary versions in previous episodes, the character of Cinderella has had a long association with birds, usually doves. And in this specific film, not only do we have the doves helping her with her chores, and the owl, which may or may not be the one who is causing the magic in the hazelnuts and giving Cinderella these clothes, but the lyrics in that one song that I said was very cowboy-esque sing about a bird. My one gripe with this outfit, though, is that this is the one time in the film where she doesn't have bangs. I'm sorry. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I think the bangs not only suit the actress's face well, but suit the character well. They make her a bit more youthful and hearken to her rougher edges since they're usually curly and a bit messy. When you take the bangs away, she just looks like a porcelain doll. She looks less like herself. However, I will concede that If they had kept the bangs, they might not have suited the veil, but I feel like that could have been easily worked around. I also remember yelling at the prince for not recognizing Cinderella's face because you can clearly see through the veil, but upon rewatch there are certain shots where her face is more obscured, so yeah, this one gets a plausible pass. So all in all, I am definitely thankful that I finally got to watch this film. It is incredibly charming, from its lead actress to how it handles being a fairy tale to just its nature of being a film from the 70s. It's very straightforward in its overall tone, but less so in how it chooses to go about the story, with multiple disguises for Cinderella and her meeting the prince several times. Unfortunately, the whole hunting scene is still kind of a snag for me, so I don't think I will be joining the many others who watch this film as a Christmas tradition, even though I completely understand how it achieved that honor. And that doesn't necessarily mean I will never watch this film again. In fact, I fully intend to. And with that, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you liked it. I know this film has a lot of fans, so hopefully I didn't say anything too egregious. All I can do is give you my personal opinion, so that's what I'm here to do. And you can give me your personal opinion by leaving me a comment and telling me what you think of this film, or if you have any suggestions for Cinderella-related media that I should look at in the future. You can see what I've already covered by checking out the series playlist. There will be links on the end screen and in the description. And you can show your support for this video by giving it a like. And even if I couldn't get this out by Christmas, I hope that you had a very happy holiday season, whatever you celebrate, and that it was filled with just life and love and joy, and that you didn't get sick like I did. But for now, I think I'm about ready to turn into a pumpkin. So I will see you next time. Bye. Mwah! Love you.
Proč nehrají k čertu, proč nehrají?
Hrajte! Prosím, hudbu!